Hello, welcome to the Dollhouse. I am the doll, and today I am going to be talking about so-called Black culture and my decision to abandon it and being associated with it. I think it's dead. As many of you know, I consider myself to be an American, just full stop American. And on forums, when I can, I just decline not to answer. Racial questions. My ancestry includes formerly enslaved Nigerian people and English slaveholders, I believe. There's more to it than that, but I'm just going based on my DNA testing results. I'm no longer accepting the identity of Blackness pushed upon me as a result of an unjust time in history. I'm considering my culture to be American culture, and I refuse to align with any one aspect of my heritage because my life experiences are influenced by so many things outside of the so-called culture of Blackness. I follow Law 48 of the 48 Laws of Power, which is assume formlessness. That's like the final step, the final boss. And I encourage all of the dolls to consider this law as something to adopt. Assume formlessness. That way you can adapt to any circumstance that may arise, any scenario that may pop up. You have a way to identify with everyone of any culture because you understand your humanity. That's really the base of where our mental, energy should just be connecting to our humanity and our connections between us. Now, the culture of Blackness was created by English slaveholders. And Black, it's an English word. In the dictionary, the word represents darkness, fear, and in metaphysics, it represents the chaotic nature of the unknown. It vibrates very differently from the word white. Darkness vibrates very differently from the word lightness. I have no fear of darkness, chaos, or Blackness. However, my humanity is not Black. My ways of being do not represent the popular Black culture, and my skin is not Black. No one's skin is Black. No one's skin is white. All skin is brown. It's literally science. And this is science. All skin is brown. It ranges from the very lightest shades of brown to the very darkest shades of brown. And according to the Fitzpatrick scale, skin is classified into 5 types. Very light beige, light brown, medium brown, dark brown, and very dark brown. The culture of Blackness was deliberately created to separate the European indentured servants from the enslaved people that had been imported from Africa. The people who were brought here in chattel slavery could never hope for freedom. And they needed to be subjugated and dehumanized in order to be controlled. They had to make them feel subhuman. So they called them Black and gave the white peasant something to feel superior about by calling them white. And these are very light beige people. These are people, and their humanity is evident, as is ours. And we here in, the dollhouse, we connect to one another with that bit of truth, that humanity. And so in recent years, the culture of Blackness, it's just become associated with so many different traits that include things like trend setting, hard work, innovation, as well as other things like degeneracy, criminality, entitlement, laziness, crassness, and strained relationships. And I myself, I want to move away from that. I don't want to be identified with the so-called Black culture. And when people ask me, well, who's going to ask me that? What people label me based on whatever they want to. The government asked me that, and I am going to decline. And I'm hoping that I can really understand why they still even track it. It should just be citizens and non-citizens. Assets and resources distributed and taxes collected in very plain ways. But, politics is a topic for a different day. Government is a topic for a different day, because a lot of these organizations in government wouldn't exist if the problems did not exist. So they are vested in making sure the problems never get solved, because they don't want to work themselves out of a job by solving problems. So anyway, in Black culture, people like Diddy have had a lot of influence, and he got arrested. I guess it was today. I saw that in the news, and this person, Sean P. Combs, formerly known as Puff Daddy, and then Diddy and Brotherly Love and other things, he had a lot of influence back when I was a teenager and growing up and going to college and all that. I remember him having like tracksuits, these Sean John tracksuits. Literally everybody had them. It was a trend. He really pushed the needle in the culture. Like after Russell Simmons, the next one up, the next mogul was, Puffy. And he had a lot of influence promoting irresponsible dating, mating styles that were just irresponsible, party culture, consumerism, criminality, and a lack of integrity through every single channel of media, from radio to schmadio, from video to lidio. He was on it. He was arrested for human trafficking yesterday or today, whenever. But his attorneys felt comfortable enough to fix their fingers to type out the words about how he has spent 30 plus years uplifting the so-called Black community. They said Black community. I said so-called, because the identity of Blackness is, it was something that was forced onto people, and it doesn't have any basis in reality. So anyway, you know what? Puff Daddy was wild. Here, I found some of his lyrics, and I used to jam to this song. It was on the Notorious B.I.G. album, the Life After Death album. And it's called The World Is Filled. And it has Puff Daddy on it and Carl Thomas, who I love. So I was just blindly rocking out to this. But he has a lyric that goes this: see, we date them like we hate them. See them like we don't need them. Treat them like we beat them. And never give them freedom. We date them like we hate them. See them like we don't need them. Treat them like we beat them. And never give up freedom. Ooh, spicy lyrics. Another thing he said in that song: we only give our number to selected few. And it's best that you never knew what good head'll do. Turn a freak into a bisexual. And if she's flexible, F the N-word next to you. So who's doing the F-ing, Diddy? It's none of my business. But what I do know is that these attitudes of, the adversarial dating relationships and the women are trash, that he really helped to promote it, And at that time, the double CD that this song was on, it was one of the biggest things out when it was out. It was everything. And I witnessed the culture shift in real time, from the point where women had some behaviors that, gate kept bad guys out to just the floodgates just being open. And it's because, music is a tool that is used to program. And the total acceptance and celebration of complete degeneracy promoted by Diddy and other people like him has become associated with this so-called black culture. And many people are choosing to be called something else and separating from being called black altogether because of these associations. I am not the only person. As a matter of fact, my channel is called The Exotical Dollhouse, inspired by Exoticals United. Many of you were probably directed over here from her channel. Exoticals United embraces the positive aspects of so-called black culture and tending to prefer to embrace ambiguity rather than accepting the commonly embraced cultural traits of so-called blackness, like entitlement and lack of self-control. That those have become synonymous with black culture, which is sad. And although the name Exotical is a tongue-in-cheek way of making fun of the women who feel like mixed and light-skinned women are natural competitors, natural adversaries, the movement or this sector of YouTube, it's grown to be embraced by people from all over the world who want to identify with the unique American culture that has been developed here and influenced by the descendants of formerly enslaved people. People want to relate to the positive aspects of that culture, and people who embrace the exotical sector of YouTube, they want to identify with that self-determination and joy and excited way of being related to our culture. So, exotical women embrace the 48th law of power too, assuming formlessness. And, the topics on the exotical channels are all about embracing cultures of all kinds, not just one's heritage, and taking the best attributes of each one. Like, why be limited by what someone has defined you as? I define myself, and I encourage the dolls to define themselves. I ran across another channel recently that a guy named Brooklyn St. Michael runs. And he has invented a new name for the descendants of formerly enslaved people in America. He calls himself an Earpoise person, and he's encouraging other people to call themselves Earpoise and to unite with him to create separate Earpoise communities. These are people who would have once considered themselves to be black or African American. And he's even got a whole uniform for identifying other Earpoise people. And so here, I'm going to show a video on why he says that he's not black or African American.
So Negro is just a Spanish term for the word black. They both mean the same exact thing. So what we come to find out is that it's not the people who call themselves black who are the ones who name themselves that. But instead, it was slave catchers who ended up placing this brand on people intended to be slaves. It gets super spicy when we start to dig into the information. And so as a free person, I don't associate myself with slave names, right? Black people were invented specifically by the European colonists for a specific purpose, to serve their needs as slaves. Nothing more and nothing less. And not just any type of slave. This is what you have to understand. Not just any type of slave. A perpetual slave. What is a perpetual slave? That means once they created the blacks, Once those people started to have children, they would create the reality that those blacks had accepted, which is being inferior, being ugly, being subhuman. All those types of characteristics, traits, and that worldview would then, they would take and they would pass that on to their children. The children would take that same worldview and that same brand of being black, and then when they had children, they would take that and they would pass it on to their children. And it would keep going on and on and on, all the way up until today, where you have the descendants of those people still hanging on to that name. Why? Because they don't have any other idea that there's another way that you can be, other than being a slave.
So I can totally understand his point of view. I mean, it makes more sense to remain formless than to identify with so-called black culture. You know, and I think it's amazing to embrace like the West African cultures where most of the formerly enslaved people were brought here from. Embracing Nigerian culture, the food, the dances, you know, the Senegalese, Ghanaian, other West African cultures. These aren't so-called black cultures. They're not, they have such a depth of identity that we can, you know, many of us in America who are the descendants of formerly enslaved people, we do have roots in West Africa. So we can really lean into that. And there's a rich history there. And then, you know, it's interesting. But on average, this is something that was published by, you know, a committee in the United Nations. Most people who consider themselves to be African Americans, the majority of people here have an average of 24% European ancestry. I think I'm right at around like 28 something, you know, and it's time for us to embrace those parts of ourselves too. You know, I've been really kind of interested in that English culture because there's a lot of rich history there and refined energy. So I really enjoy it. And yeah, it's good to lean into that. You know, it can help people to shed that sense of inferiority related to their connection to America's formerly enslaved people. It can help us to make sense of things. Dr. Thomas Sowell, a great American economist and author, says that the degenerate black culture that we witness and that I, you know, am determined to separate myself from in my own personal brand, it says that degenerate culture is actually an offshoot of so-called white redneck culture. Southern white rednecks in the antebellum South that were like overseers and, you know, the poor people in the community that were really just the degenerate people that lived in the slums of England and Ireland. That's white redneck culture, you know, and the formerly enslaved people adopted a lot of those same behaviors. This is what he has to say.
What's the difference between a black redneck and a white redneck?
Color.
Same kind of people, same attitudes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and same kind of results. One of the things I point out in this book is that, you know, as late as the First World War, when mental tests were given in the Army, there were whites from any number of southern states who scored lower on those tests than blacks from northern states. So that anyone who comes out of that culture is likely to score lower on mental tests, to do less well in intellectual areas.
So he's basically saying that the irresponsible decision-making, lack in morals, reckless dating and mating behaviors, and substance abuse affects people of all cultures, regardless of skin tone, and especially the American redneck culture and the so-called black culture in America. These behaviors don't have to be associated with America, to be honest, because again, these cultures, they existed in England. And he really documents this in his books, which I've only watched his videos about. I never read the book, but he documents this in his videos too. So I say all that to say this, that I'm really happy to be alive at a time when I have the opportunity to choose the culture that I want to identify with. You know, and this channel is focused on celebrating the beauty of all the dolls, every single doll on the Fitzpatrick scale who identifies with expressing beauty, experiencing love, building relationships, celebrating femininity, celebrating family, all those things. You know, we're creating our own brand of American femininity, embracing the things that unite us while simultaneously enjoying all of the physical attributes that make us unique. So I hope that this makes sense to you, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon.